The world in 1914 was a powder keg, a delicate balance of empires and secret alliances waiting for a single spark. Europe was deeply divided. Powerful nations were bound by secret treaties, meaning a small conflict could instantly become a global war. Imperialism and a fierce arms race fueled the tension as countries competed for land and military supremacy. Nationalism was rising, especially in the Balkans, where people sought independence from the aging Austro-Hungarian Empire. The spark came on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. The alliances kicked in. Nations declared war, pulling Russia, Germany, France, and Britain into the conflict. Within weeks, millions were mobilized. The era of the Great War had begun, changing the course of history forever. By late 1914, the War of Maneuver vanished. A brutal stalemate emerged, the Western Front. Hundreds of miles of parallel trenches were dug, separated only by a deadly no-man's land. Life was a nightmare of mud and disease. Soldiers lived in filth, sharing space with rats. Days of boredom were broken by terror. The threat of snipers or gas was never far away. Whistles blew and men went over the top, charging machine guns for mere yards of ground. To break the deadlock, new tech emerged, poison gas and the first armored tanks. The cost was staggering. Millions of lives were lost in a war with no end in sight. The era of the trenches would change the world forever. As the stalemate locked the ground in mud and blood, a new frontier of warfare opened up above the clouds. Initially, planes were the eyes of the army, used for reconnaissance to spot artillery and map out enemy movements. But soon, pilots began to arm themselves. The era of the scout evolved into the era of the fighter. The sky became a battlefield for legendary aces, where high-stakes dogfights were won or lost in seconds. Names like Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, became household legends, embodying a new kind of chivalry and terror. War also came from the shadows. Giant zeppelins and heavy bombers brought the conflict to the home front for the first time. Air power had changed warfare forever. The sky was no longer a sanctuary, but a vital part of the global struggle for dominance. While the land was locked in stalemate, the Royal Navy enforced a massive blockade, cutting off Germany from vital global supplies. Germany responded with the U-boat. These silent hunters of the deep began to sink merchant ships at an alarming rate. Unrestricted submarine warfare meant no ship was safe. The goal was simple: starve Britain before the blockade broke Germany. In 1915, the sinking of the Lusitania shocked the world, killing over 1,000 civilians and turning global opinion. The only great clash of fleets occurred at the Battle of Jutland. Thousands died as powerful navies fought for control of the North Sea. To counter U-boats, the Allies developed the convoy system, using destroyers to protect supply lines and ensure survival. The sea was a battle of endurance. In the end, the blockade held, playing a decisive role in the ultimate collapse of the Central Powers. While the West was in trenches, the Eastern Front was a war of movement, stretching across a vast, unforgiving landscape. The Russian Empire, with its massive manpower, faced off against the industrial might of Germany and the aging Austro-Hungarian Empire. Winter was as deadly as any bullet. Brutal cold and supply failures decimated armies, a grueling battle of endurance. Great battles like Tannenberg saw entire Russian armies destroyed, shaking the foundation of the Tsar's power. Behind the lines, Russia was collapsing. Hunger and exhaustion fueled a growing fire of revolution. By 1917, the Tsar was gone. The Bolsheviks seized power, promising bread, land, and an immediate end to the war. Russia exited the war with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, but the Eastern Front had left a permanent scar on Europe. For 3 years, the United States watched from across the Atlantic, holding firm to neutrality while a continent burned. But the return of unrestricted submarine warfare and the sinking of American merchant ships pushed the nation toward a breaking point. The final straw was the Zimmermann Telegram, a German proposal to Mexico to join the war against the U.S. in exchange for lost territory. In April 1917, President Woodrow Wilson declared that the world must be made safe for democracy. America was at war. The American industrial machine roared to life. Factories worked day and night, transforming the nation into the arsenal of the Allies. Millions of doughboys were mobilized. Their arrival in Europe brought a surge of fresh energy and resources to a weary and exhausted front. The giant had awakened. The entry of the United States shifted the balance, setting the stage for the Great War's final chapters. In 1918, Germany launched its final gamble, the Spring Offensive, aiming to win before American strength fully arrived. But the Allied lines held. With fresh American troops and superior resources, the tide began to turn against the Central Powers. The Hundred Days Offensive began. A wave of Allied attacks broke the Hindenburg Line, forcing a full-scale German retreat. Behind the lines, the Central Powers were crumbling. Hunger and political unrest brought them to the brink of collapse. In a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, a ceasefire was negotiated. The terms were harsh, but the guns were silenced. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the war ended. Millions took to the streets in relief. The cost was unimaginable and the peace fragile. The world had been redrawn, and the scars of the war would never truly heal. In 1919, the victors gathered at Versailles, seeking to ensure such a war could never happen again. The map was redrawn. Ancient empires collapsed, replaced by a patchwork of new nations. The League of Nations was born, a dream of resolving disputes through diplomacy rather than blood. But the peace was punishing. Germany was forced to accept full blame and pay staggering reparations. Hyperinflation and unemployment fueled bitterness. The war to end all wars felt like a lie. In the shadows of ruin, political extremes took root. Seeds of a greater conflict were sown. The peace was fragile. The long road to the next catastrophe had begun. The Great Depression shattered the global economy. In the chaos, the promise of stability through absolute power became dangerously alluring. In Italy, Mussolini's fascists seized control, promising national pride through military strength and total loyalty to the state. In Germany, Hitler and the Nazi Party exploited economic ruin, transforming the nation into a machine built for conquest. Imperial Japan sought to dominate Asia, invading Manchuria and signaling a total rejection of the international order. As dictators expanded, Western democracies chose appeasement, hoping concessions could prevent another global catastrophe. But the march was unstoppable. Factories roared, churning out weapons for a conflict far more destructive than the last. The storm was gathering. The fragile peace was gone, replaced by a shadow that would soon envelop the world. World War II was a conflict of unprecedented scale, a total war that reached every corner of the globe and touched every human life. It was a war of ideologies and industrial might, where cities became battlefields and the line between soldier and civilian vanished. From the beaches of Normandy to the ruins of Stalingrad, decisive turning points shifted the momentum toward the Allies. But the victory came at a horrific price. The atrocities and the human suffering left a deep, permanent scar on the soul of humanity. In 1945, the guns finally fell silent. The world emerged from the darkness of conflict, exhausted but ready to rebuild. From the ashes, a new world order was born. Nations united to pursue a lasting peace, vowing that such a catastrophe must never happen again. The era of the world wars had ended, changing the course of history forever. We remember the past, so we may protect our future.